matters in the government and corporate world. Hello, guys. We're going to start right now. So here, I am Dave Schaefer, and basically I'm going to talk about privacy, why it matters. And I think I have to have this conversation mainly because I was a faculty member at a couple institutions, and every semester began, what I did was I would query the students, and this is in cybersecurity, by the way. I taught offensive, defensive security. Heard this guy talk about Metasploit. That was just before me. Yeah, we've done that stuff too. A lot of this stuff is hands-on labs, and I give them scenarios, really big, long scenarios, about 15 pages long, and make them really critically think. But with that said, these people I thought would be more in tune and more sensitive to actually publishing stuff out to the web and to, through Facebook, Twitter, and all those other different social media avenues. And what I found out was like between about 60 to 80%, 85% at one point of the people that I queried didn't care about what they posted in the media. And this kind of astounded me because I read a couple books. Now, I don't know if you ever heard about Edwin Black, but there's a couple books here. I mean, if you guys want to pass them around, you can check them out. But I read these books, and it started with this one, IBM and the Holocaust, and I'm going to talk about this here today. So, and I always wanted to do a presentation on this because of it, because it really did shift my paradigm, and it's not the history that you would see that is published in your textbooks. That's first and foremost. This is the history that actually happened. This is the history that they're trying to hide from the nation, in a way. Of course, it's out there. Obviously, the facts are there and everything, but you have to dig for it. Edwin Black did that very thing. So, with that said, I have to say there's a warning, okay? This is not for the squeamish. The following content contains mature subject matter that are offensive to audiences. I usually like to try to make jokes during presentations and stuff like that, just because I do have somewhat of a sense of humor. But in regard to this, it's a very sensitive matter. And it really does, it's kind of disturbing what has happened, and it does deal with deaths of babies and a whole bunch of other stuff along the way. So if your idea of a conversation is very technical, or if you have any kind of problem with stomach and different types of facts as far as how people are treated in a dark past, then you might want to kind of remove yourself at this point. So why do we do this? So because those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So not a conspiracy theory. It's very important to point out that I spent quite a number of hours and days actually researching to give you this presentation. So this is not me with my tinfoil hat put on and making up stuff here. It's based off of fact, and if you look in the back of those books, and that's one of the reasons why I'm having you guys pass them around and look at them, you'll see that there's a lot of research that Edwin Black did himself that is actually documented in the back of every one of those books. So, Eugenics movement is based on the fact and can be researched and proven historically. The items presented here are from various publications. It's not just Edwin Black, but we have Bruce, we have the EFF, we have the American Civil Liberties Union, to mention a few, and stats are provided via the Pew Research. So I'm merely connecting the dots for you, okay? I'm not trying to make up any of this stuff along the way. About me, well, I was a full-time instructor. I stepped down from that. And I have been attending conferences like ERCON last year and stuff like that, and that's my band down by the river. But I guess if you take Craig Smith and I and you put them together, you might have this little guy. But that's kind of where I was before, and where I am now is I'm kind of seeking other opportunities. But observations, just an overview, we're going to provide privacy versus security. We're going to talk about that. We're going to give you some statistical observations of the here and now. We're also going to talk about governments and corporations along the way and where they fell ethically, okay, or failed ethically. We're also going to talk about the current privacy issues and then hopefully give you somewhat of a conclusion. Now, I did title this talk, The Sheep and the Shepherd, and I found this picture and I thought this is probably a good picture, okay? So we have somebody up here on the wall, he's representing the government, And then basically the TV set, which is actually going to come into play later in this presentation, they're reaching out and they're shaving the sheep. So who are the sheep? The people that are sheep is pretty much the people that are automatically like giving their rights away, and they really don't care about their rights, their privacy, and they're just posting whatever the heck they want about them and their family. Now, this is a good picture. I mean, how many people have saw this picture before? It's about trade-offs, right? And everybody wants to think that these are trade-offs for privacy versus security. Well, actually, this is a trade-off versus liberty and control. It's what we're talking about here. It's about our freedoms and the ability to actually give up those freedoms so that we can be controlled even more from the government. So when we think about privacy, we think about keeping our data safe from people that are not authorized to view that type of data. But when we also think about privacy itself, it is a concept entirely separate from security. However, it can be private if we can use certain countermeasures like encryption to secure our data. So encryption is definitely one of the solutions along the way. The Tor network and that type of, for in-transit traffic, if you have something that's highly sensitive, or you don't want people spying on you, or VPNs, that helps out. And I kind of give you a little bit of background, but sometimes, like, when we're talking about privacy versus security, though, it can mean a lot of things. And sometimes there is things that makes a lot of sense as far as a security trade-off, or privacy trade-off for security. Say like your credit card information. Like you get free credit card monitoring services from the companies like American Express. If a transaction occurs in another state, you gave up privacy for them to actually monitor what's being purchased on your card and where. For them to call you up and say, hey, wait a minute, something's being purchased down in Texas. Okay? Did you make this transaction? And you get a phone call. Well, you're giving up that privacy. Okay? And that's something that we actually probably like to have in a way, because we don't want to have somebody fraudulently purchasing stuff on our credit card. So there are sometimes when the security of the overall makes sense. However, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Let's think about when we actually metadata. And in general, we talk about geocaching and stuff like that, and geocaching of information. Now, I'm a father of 4 girls. It wouldn't make much sense from a security standpoint to actually post my private information, a picture I've taken of my 4 little beautiful girls in my house with geocache data located on that information so people can just figure out exactly where I live. It's basically giving a pedophile the information that he needs to go ahead and try to target my family. And that type of trade-off, it doesn't really make much sense. I think we can all probably pretty much agree on that. Now, Bruce is my hero. Okay, he's like the Chuck Norris, right, of security. And basically, he's got a couple different quotes here I want to talk about. He says, if I'm doing anything wrong, this is a general quote that I've heard from other students, and he brings up in one of his articles. And here's the argument. If I'm not doing anything wrong, then you have no cause to watch me. The problem with this is that Bruce brings up is that governments define what's wrong, and they keep on changing that definition. And that's something we have to be mindful of. Privacy is not about hiding a wrong. Privacy is about an inherent human right and a requirement for maintaining the human condition with dignity and respect. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit about eugenics today, because it had a lot to do with dignity and respect, and a lot to do with privacy, and a lot to do with security. So Americans hold strong views about privacy in everyday life. So can we say that privacy matters, but then why is social media so big? Because a lot of people say that privacy matters. We got like 74% of the people here in this poll from Pew Research, and they're saying it matters, but yet I'll show you another stat later that kind of contradicts that. So perhaps we've given up on the fact that we actually do have anything private in today's information age. So they're saying if you express confidence that their records will remain private and secure. So there's some more stats up there. And perhaps this is why, because few say they have they have a lot of control over the information. And there's 38% of the people say that they have some control, 37% say not much control, and 9% say they have a lot of control. So somehow they're like either like not living on the grid, maybe in a backwoods alley somewhere, I don't know. But eugenics itself, when we talk about eugenics, how many people have heard about eugenics? Cool. This is abnormal. Totally abnormal. Which is great because I'm abnormal too, or I wouldn't be up here talking about it. But eugenics itself is the self-direction of human evolution. So the idea is basically founded that its meaning itself comes from the Greek words well and born. And it's about creating a superior race by weeding out the weak or either limiting the productive organs or eliminating them completely. Here's a timeline of research when we talk about eugenics. And it all started in 1863 when Sir Francis Galton termed eugenics. And he's the one that actually created the word, okay? You know, using those German words, well and born. And he's a cousin to Darwin, okay? And that was in Europe when he did that. But in 1911, Carnegie supported a study that recommended gas chambers for people that are actually, and Carnegie, by the way, is in the United States, okay? They recommended gas chambers for people that were not well fit for society. This was led by the research by Blecker van Wagenen, who declared that defective inheritance should be eliminated from the human stock. In 1912, he came out with a publication. And it was, to surprise, it was well received by quite a few scientists. And what we're talking about here is at this point, this critical point in time, between 1911 and 1912, and the acceptance of these ideas in America, by the way, in the United States, I should say. I don't know if we want to include everybody in America, like Canadians. I don't know if they want to be included in this. But at this point, we have a failure. We have a failure of a couple things. We have a failure of ethics. We have a failure, in at least by this day and age, by our terminology. But by their terminology, and when we talked about ethics itself, from their standpoint, they thought it was ethical. Okay? So ethics sometimes is what people make of it. Okay? But we also have scientists that are actually getting paid and bankrolled, and they're making crap up that didn't make any sense. Okay? And this is what spewed it all on. In 1915, a Chicago native called Harry the Black Stork was going around making movies and touring the country talking about how he kills babies that were genetically defective. And this all happened in America. In 1918, California Paul Popenoe, a U.S. Army venereal disease specialist who was part of the eugenics movement and helped to spur it along in California, which actually, by the way, was the leading most offensive state in the Union, went down as saying that the first method of recommendations that he can make is that we should follow is execution. Okay, so we're not even talking about fixing people like so that they can't have babies. We're talking about right there from the Army in California. He's talking about exterminating people. Okay, in the United States. By the way, World War II didn't happen at this point. Okay? And that's the most important thing to remember. In 1933, at least 1,278 coercive sterilizations were being performed each year in California, 700 on women alone. Women were by far the population that was most affected by sterilizations at this point. So, who were the targets of eugenics? I think we have to talk about this a little bit. The targets include the feeble-minded. Some of those people were called feeble-minded just because they were introverts. And we, as cybersecurity, this is kind of like concerning to me because I know that I work with a whole bunch of introverts, okay, from a cybersecurity perspective. And those people are very intelligent, Well, usually they're taking a lot more in than I am because I'm an extrovert. And they're a lot smarter than I am. At least I put them up there. So it's kind of interesting that they actually classified introverts as being feeble-minded. Many were left to die in hospitals via neglect, but that's another story in U.S. history alone. Okay? You get put into a hospital because you're feeble-minded, and then all of a sudden what happens is they stop feeding you, taking care of you, and pretty much you fade away. In Lincoln, Illinois, hospitals fed incumbent patients milk from tuberculosis cows, or cows with tuberculosis, believing that if they were genetically superior, they would have been immune to it. So this is what they were doing in the United States. The poor, by passing laws in the United States, it allowed for the forced sterilization of citizens deemed harmful to society. Remember in the 20s we had a stock market crash? That put a lot of people out of work. That probably wasn't a good thing, for a lot of people that could work, and just because they were poor, they probably were sterilized. The criminals, they said that criminals should be sterilized. This is Theodore Roosevelt, by the way. He supported the movement, so did Tesla, Ford, and a few other people. But actually a lot of notables. And this is another failure in history. It's like all these who's at the time supported this in the United States. Basically, criminals should be sterilized, and feeble-minded people should be forbidden to leave offspring behind them. And that was the president of the United States at the time. That was his belief. Minority races, the superior race in the United States, by the way, before World War II, before the Nazi regime, was blonde-haired and blue-eyed Nordic types. By the way, I don't have blonde hair or blue eyes, so I'll probably be targeted too, right? That's why it kind of probably hits home with me. United States eugenics intended to subtract the blacks, Indians, Hispanics, Eastern Europeans, Jews, the dark-haired hillbillies, etc. So, how would the United States enforce the eugenics? Step one was to identify the so-called defective family trees and to subtract them to lifelong segregation and sterilization programs to kill off bloodlines. Same step was the step one for the Nazi regime in World War II. Okay? So how did they do it? We'll talk about that a little bit. But there was public displays and contests that were out there. Basically, there was a fitter family contest that was given out there, and basically what you're supposed to do was prove that your bloodlines were actually not contaminated by any means in order to win this contest. And contamination could mean a one blood drop rule like that happened in Virginia. Okay? One of the heads of Virginia basically said that if there's one blood drop that was African American or any one of those other races that are not Nordic, in their ideals, then you're basically classified as one of those people that would be qualified for termination. This included people that also, and this happened in Germany as well in World War II, as they found out, is when they did their analysis on the data, if say your grandparents were Jewish, but then their faith changed to Catholicism or Christianity or something like that, then basically you were classified for extermination. Okay? You didn't have to be Jewish yourself. In fact, there could have been generations before you. But again, because there was a one blood drop rule, this stuff did happen. So the term moron itself was born out of the eugenics movement, and there was actually pamphlets given along. It's almost like it's kind of like, if you're thinking they're superior, but it almost looks like a school child's pamphlet. And that derives from another Greek word meaning idiot. Okay? Eugenics in Virginia. We're talking a little bit about this. We're talking a little bit about eugenics and stuff. But believe me, this relates to technology. So just follow with me a little bit here. But eugenics in Virginia, there's a big case that's out there, and you can research it yourself. Buck versus Bell. And Oliver Wendell Holmes went down to saying, it's better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute a generation of offspring for crime, or to let them starve for imbecilely, being an imbecile, like I am, because I can't pronounce it. But society can prevent those who are manifested unfit from continuing their kind. Now, what this did was basically this ruling by Oliver Wendell Holmes targeted Miss Bell. Her picture's up there. She was 18 years old at the time. She had a child a couple of years before that, and she was adopted by a foster family. And what happened was she was raped by one of the members of the foster family. And they said, well, here she is. She has the mentality of a 9-year-old, and it was recommended by the doctor that she get sterilized. She was sterilized by Oliver Wendell Holmes' decision. And you can see the plaque right there. It actually confirms that. And basically, what happened was in between 7,200 and 8,300 people were sterilized in Virginia alone between 1927 and 1979. Carrie Buck is the person that's raped up there. She went down as saying, "You did me wrong. You did us all wrong," and I have to agree with her. They did her wrong. This goes against the 14th Amendment. Basically, when we talk about rights, the state does not have a right, according to the 14th Amendment, to enforce any law that shall be abridged the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process and law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So basically I have a George Carlin quote right here saying, like, rights, what are they? We only have privileges. And those privileges, they're made up by the government and they change constantly. And as we can see, it's changed. And the good thing is, I think it's changed for the better. Okay? Many states supported eugenics. 1907, Indiana was the first one, but they were not the most offensive one. They even enacted this plaque to try to, kind of come clean on it. And basically, the most offensive one was California. It was the third state to enact sterilization laws out there, and it accounted for 80% of the sterilizations nationwide. That's huge. Okay? Numbers declined for sterilizations after World War II, but it continued. Okay, into the 70s, and I have evidence that it actually continued into the 2010s. Okay? 20,000 forced sterilizations between 1909 and 1963 were conducted. There were people that supported this, people that were local to this region. Ford himself, there's a whole study in those books, but Ford himself helped to supply the German army with a fourth of their vehicles. By the way, GM and Mooney, those guys were actually in on it too. So was IBM. They all received the Grand Cross, the German Eagle, from Adolf Hitler for the Third Reich for supporting them. Adolf Hitler liked one of Ford's write-ins the most. It was called The International Jew, circa early 1920s. And here's what the head of Hitler's youth later had to say about this. And he was actually later the anti-Jewish governor of Vienna as well. The decisive anti-Semitic book which I read at the time, and the book which influenced my comrades, was Henry Ford's book, The International Jew. Overall, several Americans received the Hitler's German Grand Cross. What did it do for immigration? Well, we kind of see this right now. We're trying to limit immigration a little bit, but it's a little bit different. But they use statistics and that scientists derive to talk about the different types of people and their genetic defects. There was alpha, beta, and beta tests in Ellis Island that they performed that were designed to confuse. And basically what they would do is give a test, and they will give you pictures and say, okay, what's missing out of this picture? And they will have like a bowling alley, and they won't have a bowling ball in it. And they'll just have the pins and everything. Well, most of the people going through Ellis Island may never even seen a bowling alley at that point in time. They might give a picture of a postcard and say, what's missing off this postcard? Well, most of the people at that time may not have ever written out a postcard or tried to put a stamp on it. And that's what was missing. So based off of this, what they determined was 47% of whites, and I don't understand this either, like 70% of Jews, because I know a lot of Jewish white people. But that's my ignorance, I guess. And 89% of Negroes deserved extermination. So this is very racially motivated. okay? And it was like it's almost like the KKK led this movement to me, in a way. And I'm sure they had their hand in it. How does they detect the defects? They use census, they use examinations, they use the contests like we talked about. They also had a purest baby contest. Okay, who's the purest baby? Who gets to win? IBM actually had the Hollerith machine, and that was basically right here. We can see that Davenport was a person that worked with Carnegie for Carnegie with Carnegie money, and he was performing a Jamaican cross study. And this is probably the first evidence right here of them actually coding out like how to go ahead and calculate the percentage of people that actually had a Jamaican mixture in them. Okay, so they used business machines. Okay, they requested records from infirmaries and prisons and then traced it back to the families. IBM, the solutions company, had a solution for everything. They still, to this day, are considered the solutions company. They have never shaked that impression because they provide solutions. Okay? They also provide a solution to Adolf Hitler. And this is where we start to get into the technical. Okay? So we can see Adolf Hitler here with Thomas J. Watson, and everybody probably heard about the Watson computer, how smart it is. It's based off, they're so proud of Watson and his history and the company and moving it forward because he was a very aggressive leader, and he got involved in a lot of different countries. It wasn't just Germany, but and he made sure that there was different subsidiaries and everything else set up there. But in 1932, they began their talks. Basically, in 1932, what they were talking about at these meetings was like, the first thing that Adolf Hitler said is, how do I identify the Jews? He had a multi-pronged solutions that had to be followed, and he had a process that he wanted IBM to integrate with and every step of that process, including until the final solution. Does anybody know what the final solution was? Yes, execution. Exactly. So the first product was find them. The second part of the process was to oust them from their jobs, okay, and from every segment of society. And this included, again, this wasn't just the people that are currently Jewish. This is like anybody that had a Jewish bloodline. IBM worked to identify where they worked, okay, to pauperize the Jews. IBM worked with the banks to identify their accounts to speed up the process. And for ghettoization, basically IBM worked to identify the to and from addresses that they would move Jews from their nice houses to the low-end, very low-end rent districts. Then they worked on the deportation of Jews to the camp. So IBM worked to identify the exact number of trains, the boxcars, etc. So, brings us to another timeline. Okay, in 1910, there is a German subsidiary set up of IBM, and it was established. In 1928, the IBM Hollerith punch cards were used for the Jamaican race study. You've seen the program that was listed out in the other slide. In 1932, IBM partnered with Hitler, ushering in the information age. In 1933, IBM in New York instructed German subsidiaries to design a massive German census to identify Jews, origin, location, and professions. At that point, and throughout the whole war, the German regime rented the machines from IBM through a subsidiary. Okay? In 1939, the war broke out in September of 27th, and IBM quickly rushed to combine the German, Australian, and Russian firms. I left out Russian. And then in 1942, the U.S. entered the war, and at that time, Watson ordered the check machines to be put on the tags for the Nazi tabulators. And so, did they stop? No. They kept on going, even after the United States entered the war. Even the tattoos, and I'm sure people probably have seen the tattoos of the people that were unfortunate enough to be put into camps over in Nazi Germany. But even the tattoos started out as data found in punch card machines and tracking their professions, etc. Okay? And that's how they knew what they can do. Okay, this is usually a code or something that's put on their arms. They knew what profession they were. So if I had a code, it'd probably be cybersecurity or computers, and I'd probably do something analytical. This is a picture of the machines, and this was actually at the Smithsonian. And this is what started Mr. Black on his research for trying to find out what this machine was used for. Okay? And so what they would do is they had their subsidiaries in IBM would go over and service these machines, and they would fix them, they would program them, and do whatever they were told to do, okay, by the German government. However, let's flash forward to here and now. We have a social media hoover out there, sucking in information, okay? We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have everything that you can think about. And anything that you put in out there, there's big data that's going to take that information and go ahead and they're trying to figure out right now how to correlate that information. Okay? Now, is the government in on this? Now, are they going to try to do something like this again? I hope to God they don't. Okay? That was history then. And the whole point of going about eugenics and talking about the eugenics process and all the stuff that had happened back then is to let you guys know that this stuff did occur. And yes, it actually did. They did use IBM business machines. They did use computers. And what we're doing right now, here and now, is we're giving everybody all the data they need. Okay? Not only that, they're getting more data. Okay? They don't even have to worry about the blood drop rule. Now they can get inside your minds. Because now they know your likes, your dislikes, everything else. So, think it's all over? No. There's still people out there in subsets, and this is like kind of concerning to me. From 2006 to 2010, at least 148 female inmates at 2 California facilities had tubular ligation surgeries, which is, they were fixed, if you want to call that a fix, without consent. And there's a whole process on this that they did not follow at these 2 prisons. The process involves people actually going out to the courts, the prisons themselves going out to the courts to prove that these women wanted to be actually sterilized. And they never followed the process. They just did the sterilizations on these women. And this happened in the last, decade? So, brings us to current issues. It's like, there's a lot of ethics problems with this whole scenario right here. And current issues right now that I see in the government, it's really EFF concerns, Electronic Frontier Foundation, which I support. And the United States Federal Court in Virginia rules that they don't need a warrant to hack into your computer. Well, this is even giving them more information and more eyes into what we're doing. So this is why it's a current concern. The criminal defendant who has reasonable expectation of privacy in his own, does not have reasonable expectation of privacy in their computer is basically what they're saying. And this is, anybody hear about FBI Playpen? I don't know why they give these terms to this. So here's the thing, is the government, and I see this time and time again, the government uses emotion to try to go ahead and facilitate change. And we've seen it before with the FBI and the phone, the iPhone, with the, what was it called, the terrorist and San Bernardino case. Okay, but we've seen it before, and they're trying to play off emotion. It's like, okay, we hate terrorists here. Most Americans don't like terrorists. Okay, we could probably agree on that. So what they're going to try to do is bring up a situation like that to try to go ahead and sway public opinion to get them more control. Again, this is not about privacy and security. This is about control, okay, and liberties. And the same thing's happening here with Playpen, as far as my humble opinion is. Nobody's going to go out there and say, okay, I want somebody, especially a father like myself, I'm not saying that I would want somebody that is actually going to one of these child pornography sites to be out there and amongst my children. But what I'm saying is they're using this type of stuff to try to sway public opinion so that they can go ahead and create laws that say we have no reasonable expectation of having any kind of privacy in any of our devices. Senate still considering giving FBI more power to spy on browsing history via the other data. This is a separate issue. But this would give the FBI the ability to serve companies with the national security letter to obtain browsing histories. So we're talking about ISPs. So what are you doing at home? Well, we'll find out. They want more and more data. They're trying for that more and more data. And this is a simple relationship between governments and us in general. Is they got to prove that they're a sovereignty and they can protect us. Okay? And for their minds, this is what they're trying to do. But if you look at the history of FBI, by the way, does anybody know Hoover? Does anybody really know the history of Hoover and all the stuff that he used to do? You don't want Hoover to be president. And he wasn't a really nice guy as far as that's concerned. He had a lot of dirt on a lot of people, and he was able to manipulate those people to do things they wouldn't normally do based off of the data he obtained from them. Okay? So we have a big failure of people and ethics in this whole nation in general. So it's really concerning to me when I see that like the FBI is actually trying to push through yet another bill. This would give the FBI the ability to serve companies, and we talked about that. And there's more information here at the EFF, and you can follow the EFF, and you can find more information with that in general. So how we sold our souls, and this is something that Bruce did a good article on, is how we sold our souls to the internet giants. And he's talking about basically the Samsung television in that article, and I did some research outside of his article, and basically I found this article from CNN Money. And it says, many Samsung TVs, smart TVs, are come equipped with voice recognition, which allows you to bark commands at your TV. Since the television is always listening for your voice, Samsung has a warning to its customers saying every word is being captured and sent over the internet. This is like really messed up to me without dropping the F-bomb. The reason why is I remember this one little book that really I picked up and I couldn't put down and I read it within a day. Does anybody know what that is? And it started out with a TV with a camera in it. What is it? 1984. George Orwell. And boy, did he ever predict the future. Does he, you know, and this was written what? Back in what is like 40s or early? Yep, 1940? Okay. 48. Late 40s. Okay. And the reason why, I think he had a perfect roadmap. He's seen all this other stuff we talked about that we might have forgotten, never even been told through our own educational systems. About how the government actually did manipulate data. Now, again, a lot of eugenics was first born in the UK, but even after those studies from Carnegie came out, the UK actually said, okay, we're not going to even give any attention to this. This is like racial bullshit. And kind of just like discounted it. And it made the American eugenics scientists look really bad. By the way, it wasn't just like Ford and stuff like that. Rockefeller actually supported the Germans by sending over money overseas to actually go ahead and help their scientists go ahead and do more studies on eugenics themselves to actually get it, I guess, down to some kind of pseudoscience, which is like really messed up. Another thing, we're not only happy with going ahead and buying devices that may have cameras in them, but we got Barbies now that will record your child's responses and sell them to third parties. This is something that Bruce had put out there, you know, as well in that other thing. So we may also share, it goes, this article that I was reading, we may also share feature extracted data and transcripts that are created from such recordings, but from which any personal information has been removed with the service providers or other third parties for their use in developing, testing, and improving speech recognition. But, you know, it's just all kind of strange. We've got the video cameras. We all know about that. On the street, we see video cameras all the time. I grew up in a world, Wolf grew up in a world, I can tell by his hair color. But we grew up in a world, some of us, where we didn't have cameras anywhere. And this is like really strange to me. I don't like it. Okay? I'm a cybersecurity expert, but I don't like all these cameras. I don't like all these devices out there. And it really concerns me when they can actually go ahead and track different license plate numbers as it moves through intersections in different cities and tell me where I'm actually at. By the way, they don't even need that because they got stingrays, okay? A hailstorm and stuff like that. And everybody knows about stingrays and hailstorms. Basically, the United States law enforcement, okay, not everybody raised their hands. So basically, the FBI told law enforcement agencies, based off the research that I've actually discovered like months, maybe years ago when I first heard about it. But they told them not to let people know what these devices are really truly capable of. And basically, they can go ahead and track different people, but when they turn them on and they actually start to collect the information for where somebody's phone may be, they're actually going ahead and gathering data from like every phone in that vicinity. Okay? So that raises some privacy concerns in general. And there's also different types of plugins you can use those devices to extend those feature sets way beyond there. So the whole point of this, though, is just to bring out that Oakland County has one, okay? And when I did some research, and it said like the FBI was, and I don't have the document here, but it was posted online. It was basically the transcripts of the approval of Hailstorm, which is a Stingray device. I think it's by, is it Hawthorne Technologies? Okay. And then basically, what happened was they went before the Oakland board. They said, we need this to go ahead and track bad people. That's all they said. They did not say exactly what that device could do, the full capabilities, or nothing like that. And they got it pushed through, approved, and they purchased the Hailstorm device. So here's the thing. Out of this article, it says Oakland County's has led basically the publicized information that's been out there saying that they have Hailstorm has basically led to exactly what it was hoping to avoid. Public knowledge and debate about the existence of the proprietary of the invasive Hailstorm technology in the hands of law enforcement. So I wanted to highlight that. They didn't want us to know about this. Okay? They were instructed by the FBI to not let us know about it. They pushed it through. The board didn't question it because why? Why would the board question it? A lot of boards don't even know much about technology. We know that. Okay? They rely on us. They rely on them, okay, to tell them what this device does. And when they don't tell them everything about it, they just go ahead and approve it. So we got little pretty apps on our phones and stuff like that. Well, some of those apps like Angry Birds have leaky phones and apps that actually go ahead and give you details including age, location, and sexual orientation. Okay, and we install this stuff on our phone because it's like a good thing to do, right? Because it's fun. It's not limited to Angry Birds, but a study by Carnegie Mellon Institute says that about every 3 minutes on average, there's different apps that are going out there saying where your location is. So they're tracking you. And we elected to do it because we carry these. Okay? I'm no better than you. I'm a sheep. Good luck on that, though, because data is gold. They'll just add more storage because most people expect to limits on how long their records of their activity are actually stored. Even now, as we speak, the United States government is actually building a facility with like multi-petabytes of data. I think it's out in Utah or something like that. Brian, I think you forwarded something to me on that. He's not even. It's been a while. It's like a year or two ago, but out in Utah, they might even have it built by now. Yeah, 26 petabytes of data. Hoover. Okay, they're collecting our data. Current issues, again. FBI is pushing for more power and control via magistrates to allow them to issue warrants outside of their jurisdiction. This is a change to Rule 41 of the Federal Rules of the Criminal Procedure. This rule change could, and this is what the senator said, is this rule change could potentially allow federal investigators to use one warrant to access millions of computers, and it would treat the victims of the hack the same as the hacker themselves. So basically they're saying, by going ahead and doing this, I want you, but I'm going to gather all their stuff too, and oh well, we got all that data. Same thing, why would it be any different than Hailstorm? They're collecting everybody's data anyway when they open it up. So I like this quote from George Carlin. I did edit it a little bit because I didn't want to like put too many F-bombs in my presentation. I'm not that way. But sooner or later, the people of the United States or this country are going to find out that the government doesn't give a blank about them. Government doesn't care about you. All they are interested in is keeping and expanding their own power. And to case in point, I'm not trying to say like I'm anti-government. I love our government, but I'm very concerned with it. I'm also concerned with the people, given our current election choices. But anyway, what I am saying is that the government itself, again, to prove its own worth, self-worth, has to go ahead and keep its power and expand their power to try to go ahead and prove itself. Internet surveillance, we are under mass surveillance. You are being tracked everywhere you go by companies and data brokers. It can have 10 or more companies attached to one website. How many people run no scripts? Okay? Or not scripts or anything like that. Well, you know this, okay? You hit one website, you have all these other scripts, and sometimes you allow one and then another 20 pop up. It's like, where the hell did this all come from? I never even seen it. That's if you're not running that, you should run that and try to figure out how to use it, okay? Because that's a great way to really look at all this data gathering that is being done to you as you're browsing the web. Big data can be used for the good and bad. So there's so much data already collected about us. The big issue is how do you get any value out of it? Big data is the solution to that. And this is the current here and now. Okay? Just like the Nazi regime had a census that they had to compile and try to figure out where everybody was. Big data is that solution out there to convert higher levels of volumes of data into low density data that's valuable information. And it can take tens of terabytes into, and it can process tens of terabytes into the petabytes worth of data. And that's what we're talking about, is processing that much data. By the way, as we're actually, and this is what I'm seeing out there, as we're actually losing, it seems like the battle on more rights, or at least it seems like it, because FBI, NSA, and all these people are out there trying to vie for more power. We're having different corporations. We're losing on another side. Is like Apple is working on ways to shut down cameras in movie theaters. This is all like, okay, wait a minute. How is this benefiting us? Maybe we want to take a picture of our friends like sitting in front of that cool movie poster to show that we're actually there. But now they're going to shut it down. Why? Because corporations have the power in America. We don't. We know that. Okay? And it's time to wake up. If you don't. I mean, I think a lot of people in this room are probably aware of that because you at least knew what eugenics was. Apple is working on ways to turn off the iPhone cameras in certain locations. This all stems from like concerts, taking pictures in concerts and stuff like that. Again, corporate money. Okay? Corporate talks. By the way, it's a corporate and the government that landed us in the frickin' mess with eugenics. Okay? And they tried to bury that crap back in World War II. After it happened, after they liberated the camps and they've seen how many people were dead, they tried to bury it all. And they didn't. What does your online image project about you? Well, even though we're so concerned, according to those other Pew Research things, I come across stuff like this. 56% of adults surveyed don't actively think about the consequences of their online activities. These are adults. These aren't even kids. Okay, kids, you can just like, it's right through the ground. It's probably like 1% probably thinks about what they post. No, it's probably about 20%. But anyway, you get the picture, and there's consequences to this, and this is from Microsoft Trustworthy. So this leads me to the conclusion that since most people don't really give a crap, that it's all going to repeat itself again. Okay? George Carlin, I usually try to end on a positive note, but George Carlin once said that you're all screwed. And I like to kind of think of it from that standpoint, because unless people really start caring about it, and unless we're ready to give up our conveniences, we're going to still continue to be tracked. By the way, what's the biggest rage that I heard about? And I didn't even realize this before I came to Converge yesterday and I spoke for the first time. What's the biggest thing out there that's being talked about right now? The app. What the hell is it doing? It's geocaching. It's tracking. It's like we're frickin' sheep. We're just going around like little sheeple, doing our things and having fun. And by the way, it knows everywhere we're going and where we feel comfortable going, all these locations. By the way, I'm saying this kind of tongue-in-cheek in a way because you know what? I was an Ingress player. Yeah, I got to level 8. I had all the cool weapons and shit. But, but I gave it all up. And it's like, a lot of this stuff is pretty messed up. So we have to question when people think there's a trade-off via privacy versus security, we have to realize that's not really the question. It's about our freedoms, okay, versus control. When it comes to encryption, it's your friend, but it is only as good as the device and the key that you're actually using. So if your device stinks, okay, and they could break in through another way and circumvent that encryption, well, obviously that encryption doesn't really do you any good. And if you lose that key because you told your friend, like I told Brian over there, my password or something like that, and he blabs it out to the world, then it's done. You can break right into my stuff. So follow and support the EFF ACLU. They seem to be pretty good people for most recent coverage. There's also a website out there, How to Disappear Online. If you're really worried about the data that's out there, there's ways, you don't need to buy services. There's ways that you can actually research and try to figure out how to cover your own tracks, to try to cover, to do things like that. One of my big favorite things that I like to do is throw disinformation out there. And the reason why I like to do that is because maybe I'll post something like, I love Pokemon Go, okay? So that if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I love Pokemon Go, and they try to social engineer me, it's not going to work, and I kind of know where it came from, you know, because I don't love Pokemon Go, but now people know that, so I'm screwed. So here's the observations we made. So it's privacy versus security. We gave you some statistical observations. Governments and corporations, you've seen how they failed. The best way that we can actually, and you know what? Screw it. I'm going to end on a positive note. You know why? Because I think there's a positive note here. And this just really just occurred to me. Governments and corporations, ethical failure. The biggest thing that I've seen when I was teaching at colleges and universities is this, and I'm not saying this, it's not bullshit, and I truly believe it, is this new generation rocks in the way that they question every fucking thing, and thank God for them. Because you know what? You're a sheeple if you're not. Okay? And that's cool, because I'm hoping to God that they're going to question everything. And that's one of the ways that you can do it. Question authority. Okay? Because authority has failed us, traditionally. And they try to cover it up. But that's it. That's the end. Thank you for attending my talk. I hope that it was, worthwhile. So... Huh? Any questions? Okay. I don't know how much more time I have. Pokemon Go. Do you think it's good? It's a fad, but there's going to be people that are going to be playing it for years. You know that. So. Yeah. What? Yes, sir? Interesting. It was what? It's only in that one district? It's usually the case. Yeah. The district they don't need a search? Yeah, I don't know. That's news to me. That's cool to know, but go ahead. Oh. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think it's going to stop. I think people are going to continue to use it. I mean, we have Cortana on Windows. We have a whole bunch of different. It seems to be the movement. Is people want to make voice commands. They like the Star Trek, like the TV show I used to watch, right, where you can just say computer on, and the computer would just power on and stuff like that. They like that idea. And it's through our own lazinesses that will be our own demise. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, for somebody who cares about privacy, any practical first steps?
First steps? That's some. Yeah. The first step is, I think, to research the issues that are out there. Try to get more in tune with, again, the EFF, the ACLU. See where the failures were. See where they could lead to. History is a big friend of mine. It's a big friend of yours. But to due diligence, you may have to go outside. Well, you're going to have to go outside of the United States history books. Everything in this country isn't all that. It is like potpourri, smells great, although I think the American history books that we were all raised to read along the way kind of endorse that. I always use this quote. I have 4 girls, and I try to bring them up on history, and the reason why is because I don't want us to repeat ourselves. But I use this quote that I remember I was talking to my daughter. She's 11 years old now. No, 14. And basically, the other one's 11. But basically, what she said to me was like, I said, well, what are you learning today in history? She said she was learning history, right? I said, oh boy, I want to learn this. What are you learning in history? She says, I'm learning to remember the Alamo. I said, I'm sure the Mexicans will. You know, think about it from the other sides of things, you know, and question everything. But as far as security and privacy itself, there's a mixture of information out there. I would say get involved with different communities like MySec. I support MySec myself. That's why I'm here. But get involved with like-minded individuals like that. And they'll help to guide you along the way. There's different settings in your phones. By the way, iPhones actually rock in a way that they come with a lot more settings for privacy than the Androids do right out of the box. And I've actually used both, so I know. But, you know, so you'll find out little different things like that. And be curious. You know, go up, buy the devices, go play with them, you know, yourself and try to figure out, like, how to limit the geocaching data and all that other stuff, you know, along the way. Anybody else? I think we're getting pushed out. Okay. Thanks.